Hey guys, tonight we begin with silks, servitude, and survival on the steppes. We're diving deep into what it was like to be a concubine in the Mongol Empire. Forget the exotic fantasies and Orientalist fairy tales Hollywood sold you. Tonight, you're experiencing the raw, unfiltered reality of what it meant to be a concubine in the largest contiguous empire in human history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up this morning thinking it's just another day in your village. Maybe you're in Kiev, or perhaps a farming settlement outside modern-day Tehran. Maybe you're in a Buddhist monastery in Tibet, or a trading post along the Silk Road. Doesn't matter much, because by sunset, your entire world will have changed forever. The ground is shaking, not an earthquake, horses, thousands of them. You peer out through whatever passes for a window in your dwelling, and there they are, the Mongol army, stretching to the horizon like a living carpet of leather, felt and steel. Their horses are small but incredibly hardy, each warrior leading multiple mounts. The smell hits you first: sweat, leather, fermented mare's milk, and something else. Something metallic and final. It's the smell of conquest. You've heard the stories, of course. Entire cities erased from existence. Populations given the choice: surrender or die. The Mongols don't negotiate, they demonstrate. And right now, they're demonstrating outside your home. Your village elder is already walking toward the approaching horde with his hands raised. Smart man. The Mongols appreciate practical people. What happens next depends entirely on whether your settlement decides to resist or submit. Resist, and you'll be dead by evening. Submit, and you might live long enough to regret it. Congratulations, your village has chosen surrender. The wise choice really, considering the alternative, involves your head decorating a Mongol spear. But survival comes with its own price tag, and you're about to discover that the Mongols have very specific ideas about human resources. Here's where it gets interesting for you specifically. You're young, maybe 15, maybe 20. You're reasonably attractive by the standards of your culture, which means you meet the Mongol criteria for a very particular kind of survival. Because the Mongols don't just conquer territory, they conquer people. And some people, they keep. A Mongol officer is walking through your village now, pointing at various individuals. He's conducting what the Mongols call a human census, though slave auction might be more accurate. He points at your neighbour, the skilled blacksmith. Useful. He points at the village's best horses. Also useful. Then he points at you. You don't speak Mongolian, but his gesture is universal. You? Over there. Now. No? You can't say goodbye to your family. No? You can't pack belongings. The only belonging you have now is your own body, and technically, that belongs to the Mongols now too. Welcome to your new career as imperial property. You're tied to a horse now. Not riding one, tied to one. The Mongols are practical people, and they've learned that newly acquired humans have an unfortunate tendency to run away at the first opportunity. So you're connected to a spare mount by about 6 feet of rope, stumbling along behind the army as they move across the landscape. The pace is relentless. Mongol armies move faster than anything Europe has ever seen. They can cover 90 miles in a single day when they need to. You, however, are on foot, so you're experiencing every single mile of those 90 miles as a personal endurance test. Your feet are already bleeding through whatever footwear you had when you were selected. The rope around your waist is cutting into your skin, and this is just day one. The Mongol diet on the march consists primarily of dried meat, fermented mare's milk called airag, and whatever they can hunt along the way. You, being valuable property that needs to arrive in working condition, get a share of this feast. The dried meat tastes like salted leather that's been sitting in someone's saddlebag for 3 months. The airag tastes like milk that's gone spectacularly wrong, with just enough alcohol to remind you that things could always be worse. But here's the thing, it works. The Mongols have perfected the art of sustained movement across vast distances, and their diet keeps them functional in conditions that would kill most armies. Unfortunately, your digestive system hasn't had a lifetime to adapt to fermented mare's milk, so you're experiencing what we might politely call gastrointestinal distress, while walking 90 miles a day. The landscape is changing as you move. Maybe you started in forested hills, but you're heading toward the steppes now. Endless grassland stretching to every horizon. It's beautiful, in an overwhelming, slightly terrifying way. No trees, no landmarks, just grass and sky, and the constant sound of thousands of horses moving in coordination. Your fellow captives are a diverse bunch. There's a Chinese physician who's trying to convince anyone who will listen that he's too valuable to be treated roughly. There's a Persian craftsman who keeps muttering prayers under his breath. There's a young woman from your own village who hasn't spoken since the selection. You're all connected by ropes to different horses, all stumbling along behind the greatest military machine the world has ever seen. At night, the army stops. The Mongols set up their girds, portable felt tents that can be assembled or disassembled in minutes. These aren't the romantic nomad dwellings of Hollywood films. They're practical, efficient, and designed for people who live their entire lives on the move. You don't get a jur, you get to sleep on the ground, still tied to that horse, wrapped in whatever clothing you had when you were selected. The stars above the steppes are incredible, more brilliant than anything you've ever seen, with no forests or buildings to block the view. If this were a vacation, you might appreciate the celestial display. Instead, you're lying on hard ground, listening to the night sounds of a military camp, wondering if you'll survive tomorrow's march. The Mongols post guards, but they're not particularly concerned about you escaping. Where would you go? You're hundreds of miles from anything resembling civilization, in terrain you don't understand, surrounded by an empire that extends in every direction. The steppes themselves are your prison now. Tomorrow, you'll walk another 90 miles, then another. You're heading toward Karakoram, the Mongol capital, where your real education will begin. 3 weeks into your forced march across the steppes, you're starting to understand something crucial about the Mongols. They're not barbarians. They're pragmatists, who happen to be extraordinarily good at violence. There's a difference, and that difference might keep you alive. The Mongol Empire operates on a simple principle. Usefulness equals survival. Everyone has a function, from the Great Khan down to the lowliest captive. Your function is becoming clearer with each day of travel. You're not just a slave, you're a potential investment in the Empire's future. The Mongols understand that a well-functioning household requires more than just warriors and horses. You've been watching the interactions between different levels of Mongol society during the march. There are the warriors, obviously the core of Mongol power, but there are also the wives, the children, the craftsmen, the administrators, and yes, the concubines. They're not hidden away or treated as shameful secrets. They're visible, functional members of the household structure. A Mongol officer's wife has been observing you during the march. Her name is something you can't pronounce yet, but she speaks a few words of your language. She's explained, through gestures and broken phrases, that you're being evaluated. Your behaviour during this forced journey is essentially a job interview for a position you never applied for. Are you resilient enough to survive the steppes? Can you adapt to Mongol customs without constant supervision? Do you understand hierarchy and respect? Are you healthy enough to be useful long term? Most importantly, are you intelligent enough to learn your place in the system without creating problems? The woman from your village, who hasn't spoken since capture, failed this interview. She stopped eating 3 days ago, and now she's tied to a different horse, one heading in a different direction. The Mongols don't waste resources on broken property. You, however, are proving adaptable. When offered air rag, you drink it without complaint, even though it tastes like punishment. When given dried meat, you eat it gratefully. When the pace increases, you keep up. When it rains, you endure it without whimpering. You're demonstrating the first essential skill of concubine survival, flexibility. But adaptability alone isn't enough. You need to understand the complex social structure you're entering. Mongol society isn't a simple hierarchy. It's a carefully balanced system of relationships, obligations, and mutual dependencies. A concubine isn't at the bottom of this system. She's not at the top either, but she's not at the bottom. She occupies a specific niche with its own rules, privileges, and responsibilities. The officer's wife is explaining this to you in fragments of shared vocabulary and meaningful looks. You're learning that concubines in Mongol households aren't just sexual servants, they're administrators, advisors, teachers, and companions. Some rise to positions of considerable influence. Some manage entire households. Some even participate in political decisions. Of course, some also die from childbirth, disease, or the simple stress of serving men who've built an empire on violence. But that's life in the 13th century. Death is always an option, regardless of your social position. You're also learning about the religious tolerance that makes the Mongol Empire unique. Your captors don't care what gods you worship, as long as you don't cause problems. The physician from China is Buddhist. The craftsman from Persia is Muslim. The officer's wife mentions something about Tengrism and ancestors. Nobody seems concerned about converting anyone else. It's refreshingly practical, after a lifetime of religious certainty. This tolerance extends to cultural practices as well. You don't have to become Mongol. You just have to become useful to Mongols. Your language, your customs, your knowledge of local conditions, all potentially valuable resources in an empire that's expanding faster than any administrative system can manage. As the weeks pass, you're beginning to understand that you haven't just been captured, you've been recruited. The Mongols need administrators, translators, advisors, and intermediaries who understand the cultures they're conquering. A smart concubine can become an invaluable cultural bridge between the conquering Mongols and their new subjects. The landscape is changing again. You're approaching areas where the empire has been established for longer. There are roads now, administrative posts, supply stations. The wild frontier energy of the marching army is giving way to something more organized, more civilized, if you can use that word about an empire built on systematic conquest. You're about to discover what civilization looks like when it's designed by Mongols. Karakorum rises from the steppes like a fever dream of international architecture. This is the capital of the Mongol Empire, and it looks like someone took buildings from every conquered culture and arranged them according to a drunk city planner's vision. Chinese pagodas stand next to Persian domes. European-style stone buildings neighbour Central Asian felt structures. It's cosmopolitan in the most literal sense, citizens of the cosmos, all crammed together in one impossible city. You're no longer tied to a horse. 3 weeks of successful adaptation have earned you the privilege of walking unrestrained. More importantly, you've been assigned to a specific household. Not just any household. You're now property of Batu Khan's younger brother, a mid-level prince named Guyuk, who controls a modest chunk of Central Asia and needs a well-run domestic operation to support his military and political activities. Guyuk's compound reflects his status. It's not the great Khan's palace, but it's certainly not a nomad tent either. Multiple buildings arranged around courtyards, with a fascinating mixture of architectural styles reflecting the international nature of the empire. Your new home features Mongolian practicality, Chinese aesthetics, Persian craftsmanship, and European sturdiness, all somehow coexisting in one functioning complex. You're being introduced to the existing household staff by Guyuk's first wife, a formidable woman named Turagain who speaks 4 languages and runs the domestic operation like a military campaign. She's explaining your position in the hierarchy, and it's more complex than you expected. You're not the only concubine, there are currently 3 others, plus 2 additional wives, plus a rotating collection of temporary companions who serve various political and diplomatic functions. Everyone has a specific role, specific responsibilities, and specific privileges. This isn't a harem from Arabian Nights fantasies, it's a sophisticated household management system that happens to include sexual services among its various functions. Turagain is making the rules very clear. You serve Guyuk's needs, whatever those might be on any given day. Sometimes those needs are sexual, sometimes they're administrative. You'll be managing correspondence with officials in your home region, translating documents, advising on local customs. Sometimes they're diplomatic, entertaining visiting dignitaries, gathering intelligence through social interaction, representing the household at various functions. Your living quarters reflect this multifunctional role. You have your own room, small but private, with an actual bed, a writing desk, and storage for clothing and personal items. It's modest by modern standards, but luxurious compared to anything you experienced in your village. The bed has silk sheets, actual silk from actual Chinese silkworms, transported across thousands of miles of steppe and mountain to end up under your body. But luxury comes with expectations. Turagain hands you a set of clothing appropriate to your new position. It's Mongol style, but made from expensive materials: silk, fine wool, leather so soft it feels like fabric. These aren't your clothes, they're uniforms. Everything you wear now belongs to the household and reflects its status. You're walking advertising for Gyuyuk's wealth and taste. The other concubines are friendly but cautious. They're survivors, which means they understand that household dynamics can shift quickly. The Chinese woman Mei has been here for 2 years and speaks fluent Mongolian. The Persian woman Gulshan arrived 6 months ago and is still adjusting. The local Mongol woman Kacha was born into this life and treats it as normal as breathing. They're explaining the unwritten rules that govern your survival. Always be useful. Never compete directly with the wives. Understand that your position depends entirely on Gyuyuk's continued satisfaction with your performance. Recognize that performance includes everything from sexual skills to administrative competence to social grace at diplomatic dinners. Most importantly, they're teaching you about Mongol attitudes towards sexuality and relationships. The Mongols aren't prudish, they're practical. Sex is a normal human function, like eating or sleeping. Pleasure is good, competence is better, jealousy is counterproductive. Everyone understands their role, and the system functions smoothly because everyone benefits from its success. Your education begins immediately. Mongolian language lessons every morning with a tutor who served in the imperial administration, cultural training with Turagin, covering everything from proper greetings to dining etiquette to religious observances, physical training, not combat, but the kind of fitness required to survive steppe life, including horseback riding, basic medical skills, and the ability to pack and unpack a household that might need to move at short notice, and yes, sexual education. The Mongols approach this with the same practical efficiency they bring to everything else. You need to understand Gyuyuk's preferences, the household's expectations, and the techniques that will keep you valuable. This isn't Victorian prudishness or modern romantic awkwardness, it's professional development for a job that includes physical intimacy among its requirements. Your first night in the compound, you lie on those silk sheets and contemplate your situation. 6 months ago, you were a village nobody with limited prospects and a life expectancy of maybe 35 years. Now you're part of the most powerful political organisation in human history, with access to education, luxury, and opportunities your former life never could have provided. Of course, you're also sexual property in a system that could discard you at any moment. But as you're learning, survival often requires embracing contradictions. Your days now follow a rhythm that would be familiar to anyone who's ever worked in a complex organisation, except that this organisation occasionally conquers continents as a side project. You wake before dawn, not because you're being punished, but because that's when the household begins its daily operations. Morning starts with personal hygiene, and here's where you discover one of the unexpected advantages of Mongol practicality. The empire's extensive trade networks mean access to goods from across the known world. Your morning routine includes soap from Aleppo, Chinese silk for bathing, Persian perfumes, and dental care that's actually more sophisticated than what most Europeans will see for another few centuries. The Mongols understand that personal cleanliness isn't just aesthetic, it's military necessity. Armies that practice good hygiene don't die from preventable diseases. Households that maintain high standards don't embarrass themselves in front of visiting dignitaries. You're learning to bathe daily, clean your teeth with a combination of salt and herbs, and maintain your appearance at a level that would make you conspicuous in your former village. After personal preparation, you attend morning lessons with the other concubines. Today's curriculum includes advanced Mongolian grammar, basic Persian, the diplomatic language of much of Central Asia, Chinese calligraphy, useful for correspondence, fundamental arithmetic, necessary for household management, and what we might call cultural intelligence, understanding the customs, expectations, and sensitivities of the various ethnic groups represented in the empire. Your teacher is a Chinese scholar named Master Li, who was captured during the siege of Kaifeng 15 years ago. He's now one of the most respected educators in Karakoram, responsible for training household staff for various Mongol nobles. His approach is rigorously practical. You're not learning philosophy or poetry, you're learning skills that will keep you useful and alive. The Mongolian language is challenging in ways you didn't expect. It's not just vocabulary and grammar, it's an entirely different way of thinking about relationships, hierarchy, and social obligations. Mongolian has multiple forms of address depending on your relationship to the person you're speaking with, their status relative to yours, and the social context of the conversation. Using the wrong form isn't just grammatically incorrect, it's politically dangerous. Mid-morning brings household management duties. Today, you're working with Turagine to plan menus for the next week. This sounds simple, until you realize that Guyuk's household regularly entertains guests from across the empire, each with different dietary restrictions, cultural preferences, and religious observances. A dinner party might include a Buddhist monk from Tibet, a Muslim trader from Samarkand, a Christian merchant from Kiev, and a Tengris shaman from Mongolia proper. Creating a menu that accommodates everyone without offending anyone requires deep knowledge of multiple cultures' food taboos, preparation methods, and presentation styles. You're learning to think like a diplomatic chef, crafting meals that communicate respect, wealth, and cultural sophistication simultaneously. The logistics are staggering. Ingredients arrive from thousands of miles away through the empire's communication and supply network. Spices from India, rice from China, honey from Russia, dried fruits from Persia. The Mongol Empire might be built on military conquest, but it's maintained through the most sophisticated trade system the world has ever seen. Your afternoon involves administrative work. Guyuk receives correspondence from across his territories, reports from local administrators, requests for military support, intelligence about potential threats, trade negotiations, marriage proposals for various family members. Much of this arrives in languages other than Mongolian, which is where your multilingual skills become valuable. You're translating a letter from a Christian community in your former region, requesting permission to build a new church. The request is written in a mixture of Latin and local vernacular, with diplomatic language that carefully avoids mentioning anything that might be interpreted as political ambition. Reading between the lines, you understand that this community is offering increased tax payments in exchange for religious autonomy. Your translation doesn't just convert words, it provides cultural context. You explain to Guyuk that this particular Christian sect has historically been reliable supporters of imperial authority, that their leadership tends toward pragmatism over zealotry, and that granting this request would likely strengthen local loyalty without creating security risks. This is intelligence work disguised as translation services. Your knowledge of local conditions, cultural nuances, and political undercurrents makes you valuable in ways that go far beyond basic language skills. You're not just a concubine who happens to speak multiple languages. You're a cultural analyst who happens to provide sexual services. Evening brings social obligations. Tonight, Guyuk is hosting a dinner for visiting merchants from the Silk Road. Your role is to serve as a hostess, ensuring that guests feel welcome, conversations flow smoothly, and cultural misunderstandings are avoided before they become diplomatic incidents. You're wearing silk from China, jewelry from Persia, and cosmetics prepared according to Mongol preferences. Your appearance communicates Guyuk's wealth, the household sophistication, and the empire's international connections. You're a walking advertisement for Mongol success. The dinner conversation ranges across topics that span continents: trade routes through Central Asia, political developments in distant European kingdoms, new technologies emerging from Chinese workshops, religious movements in conquered territories. You're expected to contribute meaningfully to all of these discussions, while ensuring that no guest feels excluded or misunderstood. After the guests leave, you attend Guyuk in his private chambers. Tonight, he wants conversation more than physical intimacy. He's been receiving disturbing reports about resistance movements in recently conquered territories, and he values your perspective on local sentiment and cultural factors that might be contributing to unrest. You discuss the psychological impact of conquest on different types of communities, the role of religious leadership in organizing resistance, and potential strategies for improving imperial administration in sensitive regions. This is policy analysis disguised as pillow talk, and your insights might influence decisions affecting thousands of people. Finally, near midnight, you return to your own quarters. You have perhaps 6 hours before tomorrow's routine begins again. You lie on silk sheets in a room that's warmer, cleaner, and more comfortable than anywhere you lived in your former life, contemplating the strange turns that have brought you to this position. You're property, but you're valuable property. You're a slave, but you're an educated slave with influence. You're sexually available, but you're also intellectually respected. The contradictions are exhausting, but they're also the source of whatever power you possess in this system. Tomorrow will bring another day of balancing these contradictions while navigating the complex social dynamics of an imperial household in history's largest empire. 3 months into your new life, you're beginning to understand that sexuality in the Mongol Empire operates according to rules that would confuse both medieval European Christians and modern Western romantics. The Mongols approach physical relationships with the same practical efficiency they bring to military campaigns and trade negotiations. Tonight, Gyuk has requested your presence for what the household delicately calls intimate duties. This isn't the violent subjugation that Western narratives often assume about concubinage. It's closer to specialized professional service with very personal requirements. You've learnt that Mongol attitudes towards sexuality are surprisingly sophisticated. They understand that pleasure is a skill that can be developed, that satisfaction requires communication and attention to technique, and that sexual compatibility affects political relationships in ways that extend far beyond the bedroom. Your education in this area has been thorough and surprisingly respectful. The other concubines have shared techniques and approaches that reflect the international nature of the empire. Chinese methods for enhancing pleasure and prolonging intimacy, Persian approaches to sensual presentation and atmosphere creation, local Mongol traditions that emphasize mutual satisfaction and emotional connection. You've also learnt about the political dimensions of imperial sexuality. Every sexual encounter is potentially significant because pregnancy creates political relationships. Children born to concubines aren't legitimate heirs, but they're still imperial relatives with claims to support, protection, and opportunity. Smart concubines understand that their sexual activities are also investment strategies. This evening's encounter reveals Gyuyuk's preferences, which reflect his position as a sophisticated imperial administrator rather than a simple steppe warrior. He appreciates intelligence, conversation, and emotional connection alongside physical pleasure. He wants a partner who can engage with the complexities of his political position, not just a passive recipient of his attention. The conversation during intimacy ranges across the same topics that occupied the evening's diplomatic dinner. He's genuinely interested in your perspective on administrative challenges, cultural tensions, and strategic opportunities across his territories. This pillow talk carries real political weight. Your observations might influence decisions about military deployments, trade policies, or administrative appointments. But there's also genuine affection developing. Gyuyuk is finding that your intelligence and cultural knowledge make you particularly valuable as a companion. You understand the stresses of his position, the isolation of command, and the constant pressure to balance competing interests across a vast and diverse territory. Physical intimacy with Gyuyuk involves techniques and expectations that reflect the empire's cosmopolitan nature. Mongol sexual practices incorporate influences from Chinese Taoism, Persian sensuality, and indigenous steppe traditions. The result is an approach to sexuality that's both sophisticated and refreshingly direct. You're learning that successful concubinage requires skills that go far beyond sexual technique. Emotional intelligence is crucial. Understanding Gyuyuk's moods, needs, and vulnerabilities allows you to provide comfort and support during difficult periods. Cultural knowledge helps you serve as a bridge between his Mongol identity and the diverse populations he governs. Most importantly, you're developing what we might call strategic empathy, the ability to understand and respond to political pressures that affect personal relationships. When Gyuyuk is stressed about military campaigns, you provide calm companionship. When he's frustrated with administrative challenges, you offer practical insights. When he's dealing with family political drama, you serve as a neutral confidant. Your position also involves managing relationships with the other women in the household. Turagani, the first wife, maintains ultimate authority over domestic affairs, but she's increasingly delegating responsibilities to concubines who demonstrate competence and reliability. You're being trusted with more complex tasks, managing correspondence with distant territories, coordinating diplomatic entertaining, overseeing education for household children. The other concubines are allies rather than rivals, partly because the Mongol system encourages cooperation over competition. Everyone benefits when the household functions smoothly. Everyone suffers when jealousy or conflict disrupts operations. The women who survive and thrive in this system are those who understand that collective success creates individual opportunities. Kacha, the Mongol concubine, is teaching you about the traditional rights and protections that govern your position. Concubines can't be discarded arbitrarily. Imperial law requires that they be provided for throughout their lives. They have rights to medical care, protection from abuse, and support in old age. These aren't just theoretical protections, they're enforced by a legal system that understands the political importance of maintaining household stability. Mei, the Chinese concubine, explains the economic dimensions of your position. Successful concubines often accumulate significant wealth through gifts, trade opportunities, and profit-sharing arrangements. Some establish their own business interests. Some become wealthy enough to purchase property, invest in commercial ventures, or even buy their own freedom if they choose. Gulshan, the Persian concubine, shares insights about the cultural capital that comes with imperial connection. Former concubines often marry into merchant families, join religious communities, or establish themselves as respected members of urban society. The skills, knowledge, and connections gained through imperial service create opportunities that extend far beyond the household itself. Tonight, after intimate duties are completed, you lie awake thinking about the strange mathematics of your situation. You've lost personal freedom but gained political access. You've become sexual property but acquired economic opportunities. You're serving the conquerors of your people, but also influencing their decisions about governing your former homeland. The contradictions are constant, but they're also the source of whatever agency you can claim in this system. Smart concubines learn to navigate these contradictions strategically, using their position to create security, influence, and opportunity within constraints that can't be openly challenged. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to practice these skills, as Guyuk prepares for a diplomatic mission that will take the household across several conquered territories. You're travelling again, but this time, you're not stumbling behind a horse with a rope around your waist. Now you're riding in a wheeled cart designed for transporting valuable household goods across rough terrain. The cart is comfortable by Mongol standards: cushioned seats, weatherproof covering, storage compartments for personal belongings. By your former village standards, it's a luxury vehicle that would have made you the envy of everyone you knew. Guyuk is conducting an inspection tour of his territories, partly to assess local conditions, and partly to remind everyone who's in charge. The Mongol Empire maintains control through a combination of overwhelming military force and regular demonstrations of imperial presence. Local administrators need to see their superiors occasionally, if only to remember that distant authority has very real teeth. Your role on this journey is complex and politically significant. You're not just travelling for Guyuk's personal convenience, you're serving as a cultural interpreter and diplomatic asset. Many of the territories you're visiting include populations from your ethnic background, and your presence helps communicate imperial accessibility and cultural inclusion. The travelling household is a mobile demonstration of Mongol imperial ideology. Guyuk's retinue includes wives, concubines, children, administrators, guards, servants, craftsmen, and scholars representing dozens of different cultures and languages. It's a microcosm of the empire itself, diverse, functional, and united under Mongol authority. Your first stop is a regional administrative centre that was your neighbour's trading post before the conquest. The transformation is remarkable and slightly unsettling. The basic layout is familiar, but everything has been reorganised according to Mongol efficiency standards. New roads, improved storage facilities, expanded market areas, administrative buildings designed for managing much larger territories than any local ruler ever controlled. The local population's reaction to your arrival reveals the complex dynamics of imperial rule. They're clearly nervous about the inspection visit, but they're also genuinely respectful of Mongol authority. The empire has brought peace, security, and economic opportunities that didn't exist under previous rulers. People are better fed, better protected, and better connected to international trade networks than they were before conquest. Your role during these visits is to serve as a bridge between imperial authority and local concerns. You speak the local language without accent, understand regional customs and sensitivities, and can explain Mongol policies in terms that make sense to local populations. You're also gathering intelligence about local sentiment, potential problems, and opportunities for improved administration. During formal receptions, you sit with the other concubines in a position that communicates your status within the imperial hierarchy. You're clearly valuable property, but you're also clearly trusted with important responsibilities. Local leaders understand that you have access to Gyuyuk's ear, and that your opinions might influence imperial decisions affecting their territories. The evenings on this journey provide opportunities for extended conversations with Gyuyuk about the challenges of governing a diverse empire. He's genuinely interested in your observations about local conditions, cultural tensions, and administrative effectiveness. Your perspective as someone who understands both imperial priorities and local concerns makes you particularly valuable for these discussions. Physical intimacy during travel takes on additional political significance. Gyuyuk's tent is set up according to strict protocols that communicate his status to everyone in the travelling party. Your presence in his private quarters sends messages about your position in the household hierarchy and your access to imperial confidence. But the nights also reveal Gyuyuk's vulnerabilities and concerns. Managing an empire is exhausting, lonely work that requires constant attention to competing priorities and potential threats. He values your companionship, partly because you understand the pressures of his position, without being directly involved in the political conflicts that create those pressures. You're learning about the logistics that make Mongol mobility possible. The travelling household includes specialists responsible for everything from horse care to weather prediction to medical treatment. Food supplies are coordinated with local administrators along the route. Emergency contingencies are planned for every possible delay or disruption. The Mongol communication system is particularly impressive. Messages travel between administrative centres faster than any European postal system, using relay riders who change horses at regular intervals. Orders from Karakoram can reach territorial governors within weeks, regardless of distance. Intelligence about local conditions flows back to central command with similar efficiency. Your cart companions include other concubines, administrative staff, and scholarly advisors. The conversations during long travel days range across topics that reflect the empire's international scope. Trade negotiations with distant kingdoms, technological innovations emerging from conquered territories, religious movements that might affect political stability. These discussions are part of your continuing education in imperial administration. You're learning to think on continental scales, to understand how decisions made in Mongolia affect communities thousands of miles away, and to appreciate the complex calculations required to maintain stability across the world's largest political organization. The landscape changes dramatically as you move through different territories. Forests give way to grasslands, mountains interrupt vast plains, rivers require engineering solutions that demonstrate the empire's technical capabilities. Each region presents different challenges for imperial administration and different opportunities for economic development. You're also observing the human geography of conquest. In recently conquered territories, the population shows clear signs of adjustment stress. People are nervous, defensive, and unsure about their place in the new system. In territories that have been under Mongol rule for longer periods, the population appears more relaxed and confident about their relationship with imperial authority. After 2 weeks of travel, you're beginning to appreciate the scale of what the Mongols have accomplished. They've created a political and economic system that spans continents, incorporates dozens of different cultures, and maintains stability through a combination of overwhelming military superiority and surprisingly sophisticated administrative competence. Your next destination is a frontier garrison, where Mongol authority is still being established. Here, your role shifts from diplomatic interpreter to intelligence gatherer. The local population hasn't fully accepted imperial rule, and resistance movements are still active in the surrounding mountains. Your job is to assess the political climate and identify potential sources of instability. The garrison commander is a veteran warrior named Jelme, who spent 15 years pacifying conquered territories. He understands that successful occupation requires more than military force. It requires cultural sensitivity, economic development, and political accommodation with local leadership. Your insights about regional customs and population dynamics help him refine his approach to governance. During your stay at the garrison, you witness the Mongol method for dealing with persistent resistance. It's not the indiscriminate slaughter that European chronicles describe. It's targeted, strategic violence designed to eliminate leadership while preserving economically productive populations. The Mongols understand that dead subjects don't pay taxes or provide military recruits. The evenings at the garrison reveal different aspects of Gyuk's personality. Away from the formal protocols of court life, he's more relaxed, more willing to show vulnerability and uncertainty. He genuinely struggles with the moral complexities of governing conquered populations, and he values your perspective as someone who's experienced conquest from both sides. Your sexual relationship during this period becomes more emotionally intimate as political pressures increase. Gyuk is dealing with reports of rebellion, administrative corruption, and family political conflicts back in Karakoram. Physical intimacy provides emotional release and psychological comfort that helps him maintain functionality under stress. 6 months into your life as an imperial concubine, you're learning that survival in this system requires more than just pleasing Gyuk sexually and socially. You need to understand the economic dimensions of your position and develop financial strategies that will protect you if circumstances change. Turagi is teaching you about the household's financial operations, partly because she needs competent assistance, and partly because she understands that educated concubines are more valuable than ignorant ones. You're learning to read financial documents, track trade investments, and manage the complex accounting required for an imperial household. The household's income derives from multiple sources. Gyuk receives a share of tax revenues from his territories, profits from trade operations conducted under imperial authority, tribute payments from subordinate rulers, and gifts from allies and potential allies. Managing this income requires sophisticated financial planning and investment strategies. Your language skills make you particularly valuable for international trade correspondence. Merchants from across the empire send requests for investment capital, partnership opportunities, and trading licenses. Your translations don't just convert languages, they provide cultural analysis that helps the household evaluate business risks and opportunities. You're also learning about the informal economy that surrounds imperial households. Servants, concubines, and administrators often conduct their own business activities, using their positions to access trade networks and investment opportunities. Smart concubines can accumulate considerable personal wealth through these activities. Mei, the Chinese concubine, has established a small but profitable business importing luxury goods from her homeland. She uses her connections with Chinese merchants and her understanding of Mongol preferences to identify products that will sell well in imperial markets. Her profits are reinvested in expanding the operation and diversifying into related businesses. You're beginning to develop your own economic strategies. Your knowledge of your former region's agricultural products and craft specialties creates opportunities for trade relationships. Local producers need access to imperial markets. Imperial consumers want access to regional specialties. You can serve as an intermediary who benefits both sides while generating personal income. The household's accounting system is remarkably sophisticated for the 13th century. Records are kept in multiple languages using various numerical systems, cross-referenced to prevent fraud and theft. Investment decisions are based on careful analysis of risk factors, market conditions, and political stability. Your education in household finance includes learning about the legal protections that govern concubine property rights. Imperial law recognizes your right to accumulate personal wealth, own property, and engage in business activities. These rights can't be arbitrarily revoked, and they provide a foundation for long-term financial security. Gyuk is encouraging your economic development because successful concubines reflect well on the household's management and contribute to its overall prosperity. He's also pragmatic enough to understand that economically independent concubines are more loyal and less likely to create problems through desperation or jealousy. Tonight, you're reviewing trade proposals with Gyuk in his private chambers. A group of merchants wants to establish a new trading route through your former region, and they're requesting imperial protection and investment capital. Your analysis considers not just the economic potential, but also the political implications of increased imperial presence in sensitive territories. The conversation moves naturally from business analysis to personal intimacy. Gyuk appreciates intelligence and competence, and your growing expertise in financial matters makes you more attractive as a companion. Physical pleasure is enhanced by intellectual respect and emotional connection. After intimate activities conclude, you discuss your personal economic plans. You want to establish a small trading operation that will provide income security while contributing to the household's prosperity. Guyuk approves the plan and offers to provide initial capital in exchange for a share of future profits. This conversation illustrates the complex nature of concubine relationships in the Mongol system. You're simultaneously sexual property and business partner, personal companion and economic asset. The contradictions create opportunities for those smart enough to navigate them successfully. 1 year into your new life, you've achieved something that would have seemed impossible during those first terrifying weeks of captivity. You've become genuinely comfortable with Mongol culture, not resigned to it, not merely adapted to it, but actually comfortable with its values, customs, and social expectations. The transformation hasn't been easy or complete. You still dream sometimes of your former village, still feel pangs of loss for the life you'll never return to. But you've also developed genuine appreciation for aspects of Mongol civilization that are superior to anything you experienced in your former existence. The religious tolerance, for instance. The Mongols' practical approach to spirituality creates an environment where different faith traditions can coexist without constant conflict. You've attended Buddhist ceremonies, Islamic prayers, Christian masses, and Tengris rituals, often in the same week. The intellectual stimulation of this religious diversity is remarkable after a lifetime of narrow sectarian certainty. The social mobility is equally impressive. The Mongol Empire promotes people based on competence rather than birth, which means that former slaves can rise to positions of significant authority if they demonstrate useful skills. You've seen captured craftsmen become wealthy merchants, conquered administrators become imperial governors, and foreign scholars become trusted advisors to the Khan himself. Your own position exemplifies this meritocratic approach. You've evolved from terrified captive to trusted household administrator, financial advisor, and cultural interpreter. Your opinions influence decisions affecting thousands of people across vast territories. Your economic activities generate income that provides security and independence. The gender dynamics are particularly striking. Mongol women enjoy freedoms and responsibilities that would shock most medieval societies. They manage households, conduct business, participate in political decisions, and maintain considerable personal autonomy. As a concubine, you occupy a complex position within this system, but it's a position with real power and genuine opportunities. Turigine has been teaching you about the historical development of Mongol women's rights. The harsh realities of steppe life required that everyone contribute to survival, regardless of gender. Women who could manage resources, defend settlements, and make complex decisions were too valuable to be confined to purely domestic roles. This practical egalitarianism extends to sexual relationships. Mongol culture recognizes that sexual satisfaction requires attention to both partners' needs, and that sustainable relationships depend on mutual respect and emotional connection. The education you've received in sexual techniques emphasizes pleasure, communication, and psychological intimacy alongside physical performance. Your relationship with Guyuk has deepened considerably over the past year. What began as a strictly transactional arrangement has evolved into something approaching genuine partnership. He relies on your intelligence, trusts your judgment, and enjoys your companionship in ways that extend far beyond sexual services. This emotional development creates new challenges and opportunities. Deeper personal connection increases your influence, but also increases your vulnerability. Guyuk's affection provides protection and privilege, but it also makes you a target for anyone who wants to manipulate or harm him through personal relationships. The other household women have been teaching you to navigate these emotional complexities. Jealousy is natural but counterproductive. Possessiveness is understandable but politically dangerous. Smart concubines learn to balance emotional authenticity with strategic calculation, developing genuine feelings while maintaining awareness of their position's inherent instability. You're also learning about the life cycle of concubine relationships in Mongol households. Some concubines serve for decades, becoming integral parts of the family structure. Some are eventually released to marry into merchant families or establish independent lives. Some die in childbirth, from disease, or from the simple stresses of imperial life. The key to long-term survival is developing multiple sources of value. Sexual attractiveness fades, but intelligence, cultural knowledge, administrative competence, and economic skills can provide security throughout a lifetime. The most successful concubines are those who transform themselves from sexual property into indispensable household resources. Your Chinese language skills have improved to the point where you can read classical poetry and philosophical texts. Your Persian is fluent enough for diplomatic correspondence. Your Mongolian now includes the formal vocabulary required for legal documents and imperial proclamations. This linguistic competence makes you valuable for increasingly complex translation and cultural interpretation tasks. Tonight, you're attending a celebration of Naadam, the traditional Mongol festival featuring wrestling, archery, and horse racing. As a member of Gyuk's household, you participate in the festivities, while also serving as hostess for visiting dignitaries from across the empire. Your role requires you to balance personal enjoyment with professional responsibilities. The festival provides opportunities to observe Mongol culture at its most authentic. Away from the international sophistication of court life, you see the traditional values and customs that shaped the people who conquered half the world. The emphasis on physical prowess, competitive spirit, and respect for skill regardless of social status reflects the nomadic heritage that still influences imperial ideology. Your own participation in the festivities demonstrates how completely you've integrated into Mongol society. You're cheering for wrestlers, placing bets on horse races, and drinking airag with genuine enjoyment rather than diplomatic necessity. The cultural transformation is remarkable. You've internalized values and preferences that once seemed foreign and threatening. But integration comes with psychological costs. You're becoming emotionally distant from your original culture and identity. The person you were before conquest is fading into memory, replaced by someone shaped by Mongol values and imperial priorities. This transformation is necessary for survival, but it's also a form of loss that creates its own kind of grief. The evening concludes with private celebration in Gyuk's chambers. The excitement of the festival, the pleasure of successful entertaining, and the satisfaction of cultural competence combine to create an atmosphere of genuine intimacy and shared enjoyment. Physical pleasure becomes an expression of emotional connection rather than mere duty fulfillment. Afterwards, lying in post-coital satisfaction, you contemplate the strange mathematics of cultural adaptation. You've lost your original identity, but gained access to a civilization more sophisticated and powerful than anything your former culture produced. You've become property, but acquired freedoms and opportunities unavailable to most free people in your former society. The contradictions remain, but they no longer feel like violations. They've become the normal complexities of a life that's far more interesting, secure, and influential than anything you could have achieved in your original circumstances. 18 months into your life as Gyuk's concubine, you discover that you're pregnant. This development transforms your position in the household from temporary sexual property to permanent family member, but it also introduces new complexities that will define the rest of your life. The news is greeted with mixed reactions throughout the household. Torrigen is pleased because children strengthen family bonds and demonstrate the household's fertility and prosperity. The other concubines are supportive, but also slightly competitive. Pregnancy brings privileges and security that affect everyone's relative status. Gyuk himself is satisfied rather than overjoyed. Children by concubines are expected developments rather than surprising gifts. Your legal status changes immediately upon confirmation of pregnancy. Imperial law provides specific protections for pregnant concubines and their children. You can't be sold, discarded, or punished arbitrarily. You're entitled to medical care, nutritional support, and protection from harmful work assignments. Most importantly, your child will be recognized as Gyuk's offspring, with legitimate claims to family support throughout their lifetime. But imperial motherhood also brings new obligations and restrictions. Your primary responsibility is now producing a healthy child who can contribute to the family's power and prestige. Your diet, activities, and social interactions are all subject to oversight designed to optimize pregnancy outcomes. Personal preferences become secondary to fetal development requirements. The Mongol approach to pregnancy and childbirth reflects their practical attitude toward most aspects of life. They understand that maternal health directly affects infant survival, so pregnant women receive excellent medical care by 13th century standards. They recognize that emotional stress can harm pregnancy outcomes, so expectant mothers are protected from unnecessary conflicts and pressures. Your medical care includes a Chinese physician who specializes in reproductive health, a Mongol midwife with decades of experience, and access to medications and treatments gathered from across the empire. The fusion of different medical traditions creates a comprehensive approach to pregnancy management that's remarkably sophisticated for its era. The physician explains that your diet must now include specific foods believed to strengthen developing children and improve delivery outcomes. Lamb liver for blood strength, fish from mountain streams for brain development, herbs from Tibet for preventing miscarriage, Persian dates for easy labor. The international nature of the empire means access to pregnancy foods that most women of your era could never afford. Your daily routine changes to accommodate pregnancy requirements. Morning sickness is treated with ginger from India and acupuncture from China. Exercise consists of gentle horseback riding and walking designed to maintain fitness without risking injury. Evening activities focus on relaxation and stress reduction rather than intensive household management duties. The other women in the household share knowledge about pregnancy survival strategies. Mei explains Chinese techniques for managing labor pain. Gulshan describes Persian methods for recovering from childbirth. Kulcha provides traditional Mongol wisdom about raising children in imperial households. But pregnancy also reveals the darker realities of concubine motherhood. Your child will be legitimate family members, but never potential heirs. They'll receive education, support, and opportunities, but they'll always be secondary to children born to official wives. Their futures will depend entirely on their ability to prove useful to the family's political and economic interests. Gender will profoundly affect your child's prospects. Sons can become military officers, administrative officials, or business managers. They might even receive territorial assignments or marriage alliances that establish them as minor nobles. Daughters become diplomatic assets through strategic marriages, or valuable household managers through education and training. Your relationship with Guyuk evolves as pregnancy progresses. Sexual activities decrease in frequency and intensity as your body changes, but emotional intimacy increases as he begins thinking of you as the mother of his child rather than just a temporary sexual companion. The relationship becomes more familial and less transactional. Physical changes bring their own challenges. Mongol clothing must be adjusted to accommodate your expanding body. Travel becomes more difficult and potentially dangerous. Your energy levels fluctuate in ways that affect your ability to fulfill household responsibilities. Morning sickness makes certain foods and smells unbearable, complicating your role in managing diplomatic entertaining. The household adjusts its operations to accommodate your pregnancy needs. Other concubines assume additional responsibilities. Servants take over tasks that might be physically demanding. Administrative duties are modified to reduce stress and allow for rest periods. But pregnancy privileges come with increased scrutiny. Your behavior, diet, and activities are constantly monitored to ensure optimal outcomes. Privacy decreases as medical care requires frequent examinations and consultations. Personal autonomy is further restricted by the imperative to protect the developing child. As your pregnancy advances, you begin to understand that this child will be both your greatest security and your greatest vulnerability. A healthy child establishes your permanent place in the family structure. An unhealthy child or difficult delivery could cost you your position or even your life. Everything now depends on successful completion of a biological process largely beyond your control. The psychological pressures are intense. You're carrying the genetic legacy of one of the empire's most powerful families, but you're also responsible for outcomes that medical science can't guarantee. Success brings lifetime security. Failure could mean disaster for both you and your child. 7 months pregnant, you feel the baby moving inside you and contemplate the strange turns that have brought you to this moment. A year and a half ago, you were a village nobody with no prospects beyond subsistence survival. Now you're carrying the child of an imperial prince with access to medical care, nutrition, and security that represent the pinnacle of 13th century civilization. Your child will grow up bilingual, educated, and connected to the most powerful political organization in human history. They'll have opportunities and privileges that were unimaginable in your former life. But they'll also live with the constant awareness that their position depends entirely on family approval and imperial stability. As you prepare for labor, you're practicing breathing techniques learned from a Tibetan monk, taking pain medications developed by Persian physicians, and planning delivery positions recommended by Chinese medical texts. Your child will be born into a truly international civilization, heir to the accumulated knowledge and resources of conquered continents. Tomorrow will bring another day of managing pregnancy discomforts while fulfilling whatever household duties your condition allows. In a few months, you'll discover whether this biological gamble will secure your future or destroy it entirely. Labor begins during a winter storm that blankets Karakoram in snow so deep that the city seems suspended in white silence. The timing feels significant. Your child will be born during the season when even the mighty Mongol Empire must bow to natural forces beyond human control. The birthing chamber has been prepared according to protocols that blend medical knowledge from across the empire. Chinese silk hangings to maintain warmth, Persian incense to purify the air, Mongol charms to ensure easy delivery, Tibetan prayer flags to invoke protective spirits. Your child will enter the world surrounded by the international wisdom that defines imperial civilization. The labor is long and difficult. 17 hours of contractions that test every limit of your physical endurance and mental resilience. The Chinese physician monitors your progress with techniques unknown in your former village. The Mongol midwife coaches you through breathing patterns developed across generations of stepmothers. The Persian herbalist administers pain-reducing medications that make the agony bearable. Gyuyuk waits in an adjacent chamber, conducting routine business while remaining available for immediate consultation if complications arise. His apparent calm conceals genuine anxiety. Difficult deliveries can kill both mother and child, eliminating valuable household members and creating political complications with family relationships. Finally, after nearly a full day of labor, your son emerges into the world with a cry that announces his survival to the entire household. He's healthy, complete, and unmistakably alive, the most important criteria for imperial children. The relief throughout the chamber is palpable. You've successfully completed the most dangerous challenge of concubine life. The child is immediately examined by all 3 medical specialists. Chinese techniques for assessing infant health, Mongol traditions for identifying physical strength and intelligence, Persian methods for predicting future development and potential. The consensus is favorable. Your son appears strong, healthy, and likely to survive the dangerous early months of 13th century childhood. Your recovery follows protocols designed to optimize maternal survival and future fertility. Complete bed rest for 2 weeks, a diet rich in proteins and vitamins from across the empire, daily medical examinations to monitor healing progress, herbal treatments to promote milk production and prevent infection. The naming ceremony reflects your son's complex position within the family hierarchy. He receives a Mongol name that identifies him as Gyuyuk's offspring, but he's also given secondary names from your cultural tradition. The combination communicates both his legitimate family membership and his mother's foreign origins. Your status in the household changes fundamentally with successful childbirth. You're no longer just a concubine, you're now the mother of a family member, with all the rights and responsibilities that relationship entails. Your position becomes much more secure, but it also becomes more complex as you navigate the politics of imperial motherhood. The first months of your son's life introduce you to the realities of raising children in an imperial household. Your baby receives the best medical care available in the 13th century world, Chinese pediatric techniques, Mongol nutritional wisdom, Persian developmental theories, Tibetan spiritual protection. The accumulated knowledge of conquered civilizations focused on ensuring one child's optimal development, but imperial childhood also involves early introduction to political realities. Your son's future depends entirely on his ability to prove useful to the family's interests. Education begins in infancy, with language exposure, cultural training, and physical development designed to maximize his potential contributions to imperial goals. You're learning the complex dynamics of concubine motherhood. Love for your child conflicts with awareness that his success requires behaviors and attitudes that might distance him from you emotionally. Imperial loyalty must supersede maternal attachment if conflicts arise between family interests and personal relationships. 18 months after your son's birth, you're pregnant again. This second pregnancy receives less attention and excitement. You've already proven your fertility and your children's viability. The household treats it as a routine development rather than a significant event. Your second labour is easier, but more dangerous. Complications arise that threaten both your life and the baby's survival. For several terrifying hours, the medical team struggles to manage bleeding that could prove fatal. You drift in and out of consciousness, aware that you might be dying while your daughter fights for her own survival. Both of you survive, but the experience leaves you weakened and newly aware of concubine life's fundamental precariousness. Childbirth in the 13th century kills even women with access to the best medical care available. Your position provides advantages, but it can't eliminate the basic biological risks that threaten every mother's survival. Your daughter's birth coincides with political developments that will reshape your family's circumstances. Word arrives that the Great Khan has died, setting off succession struggles that will determine the empire's future direction. Family alliances and loyalties that seemed stable yesterday become fluid and potentially dangerous. Gyuyuk must now choose sides in imperial politics that could elevate his family to new heights of power or destroy them entirely. Your children's futures depend on decisions being made in distant councils, where their existence might be forgotten or deliberately ignored. Imperial succession transforms every relationship into a strategic calculation with life or death consequences. The household's daily routines continue despite political upheaval. Children must be fed, educated, and protected regardless of dynastic struggles. Business operations require attention even when imperial stability is uncertain. Life proceeds according to its own necessities, while great powers compete for ultimate authority. But the underlying tensions affect everything. Conversations become more guarded. Travel plans are postponed indefinitely. Investment decisions wait for political clarification. Even intimate relationships carry new weight, as personal loyalties might influence family survival during succession conflicts. You're nursing your daughter while monitoring political developments that could determine whether your children grow up as privileged imperial relatives or as casualties of dynastic warfare. The contradictions of concubine motherhood intensify during periods of political instability. You're responsible for your children's welfare, but powerless to control the forces that will shape their futures. Tonight, Gyuyuk discusses his political options with you in the privacy of his chambers. Your perspective as an outsider who understands imperial dynamics, but isn't directly involved in family conflicts, makes you valuable for strategic planning. Your children provide additional motivation for choosing sides carefully. Their lives depend on their father's political judgment. Physical intimacy continues despite the pressures of early motherhood and political uncertainty. Sexual relationships provide emotional release and psychological comfort during stressful periods. But pregnancy and nursing have changed your body in ways that require adjustments to sexual techniques and expectations. As you lie awake listening to your daughter's breathing while contemplating the political storms gathering around your family, you understand that your children will face challenges and opportunities you never imagined. They'll grow up as imperial citizens with access to education, resources, and experiences that span continents. But they'll also live with the constant awareness that their privilege depends on forces beyond anyone's complete control. Your son is already showing signs of intelligence and physical development that suggest he might become a valuable family asset. Your daughter appears healthy and alert, despite the difficult birth. Both children carry genetic and cultural legacies that might prove advantageous in an empire that values diversity and competence. But their success will ultimately depend on their ability to navigate the complex dynamics of imperial politics, while maintaining the family loyalties that provide their only real security. Your role as their mother is to prepare them for this challenge while protecting them from its worst dangers. Your son is now 4 years old, and his formal education begins with a ceremony that reflects his position as a minor imperial relative. He's old enough to start learning the skills that will determine his value to the family and his prospects for adult success. The ceremony takes place in the household's main reception hall, with representatives from various cultural traditions offering their specialized knowledge. The Chinese tutor presents the classical texts that form the foundation of administrative education across the empire. Confucian philosophy, historical precedents, mathematical principles, and linguistic skills necessary for correspondence with the empire's eastern territories. Your son will learn to read and write Chinese characters alongside the Mongolian script that serves as his primary written language. The Persian scholar offers training in Islamic law, commercial arithmetic, and the diplomatic protocols required for managing relationships with the empire's western territories. Persian serves as the lingua franca for much of Central Asia, making these skills essential for anyone expecting to participate in imperial administration. The Mongol elder teaches traditional steppe customs, military tactics, and the leadership principles that built the empire: horseback riding, archery, wrestling, and the strategic thinking that enables small forces to defeat much larger armies. These skills remain central to Mongol identity, despite the empire's increasing sophistication and urbanization. Your daughter, now 2.5, participates in a parallel educational process designed for imperial women. She learns household management, multiple languages, cultural protocols, and the diplomatic skills that enable women to influence political decisions through social relationships. Her education emphasizes practical competence rather than ornamental accomplishments. Both children receive religious instruction that reflects the empire's tolerance for diverse spiritual traditions. They learn about Tengrism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and local folk beliefs without being required to choose exclusive loyalty to any single system. This religious flexibility prepares them for the cultural complexity they'll encounter throughout their lives. Your role in their education involves more than maternal supervision. You're responsible for teaching them your native language and cultural traditions, ensuring they understand their mother's heritage alongside their father's imperial identity. This bicultural education creates opportunities, but also potential conflicts as they mature. The children's daily routine reflects imperial educational priorities. Morning lessons in literacy and numeracy, using texts from multiple cultural traditions. Afternoon physical training, emphasizing the combat skills that remain central to Mongol identity. Evening social education, covering the diplomatic and cultural competencies required for imperial service. But education in an imperial household also involves early exposure to political realities. Your children witness high-level negotiations, observe diplomatic protocols, and listen to strategic discussions that most people never experience. They're learning statecraft through immersion in actual governmental operations. The succession crisis that began with the Great Khan's death has finally resolved with Mongol Khan's ascension to supreme authority. This development affects your family's position and your children's prospects. Gyuyuk chose the winning side in the succession struggle, which enhances his influence and creates opportunities for advancement. Your son's education now includes preparation for potential administrative assignments in distant territories. He's learning the languages, customs, and legal systems he might need to govern conquered populations. At age 4, he's already being groomed for responsibilities that could affect thousands of people across vast regions. Your daughter's education emphasizes the diplomatic marriages that create political alliances between imperial families. She's learning to analyze family genealogies, evaluate territorial holdings, and understand the strategic calculations that determine marriage negotiations. Her personal preferences will be secondary to political necessities. The international nature of their education creates fascinating intellectual opportunities. Your children are learning to think across cultures, to understand different philosophical systems, and to communicate effectively with people from radically different backgrounds. They're developing intellectual flexibility that will serve them well in an empire that spans continents. But multicultural education also creates identity challenges. Your children sometimes struggle to understand which traditions and loyalties should take precedence when cultural values conflict. Their mixed heritage provides advantages, but also complicates their sense of belonging within any specific cultural community. You're teaching them to navigate these complexities by embracing their multicultural identity rather than choosing between different aspects of their heritage. They're learning to be simultaneously Mongol and foreign, imperial and local, traditional and cosmopolitan. This flexibility might become their greatest asset in an empire that values adaptability. Physical training remains central to their education, despite the family's increasing involvement in administrative rather than military activities. Both children learn horseback riding, archery, and wrestling. They develop the physical competence and competitive spirit that define Mongol identity across all social levels. Your son shows particular aptitude for languages and strategic thinking. He's already fluent in Mongolian and your native tongue, making progress in Chinese and Persian, and beginning to understand the diplomatic subtleties that govern imperial politics. His teachers predict he might become valuable for cultural interpretation and administrative assignments. Your daughter demonstrates exceptional social intelligence and memory for genealogical relationships. She can already identify the family connections and political alliances that determine imperial power structures. Her teachers suggest she might become influential through marriage negotiations and household management. The children's education includes practical training in the business operations that support imperial households. They're learning about trade networks, investment strategies, and the financial management required for maintaining their lifestyle. Economic competence provides security that transcends political upheavals. Religious education continues to emphasize tolerance and practical accommodation rather than theological precision. Your children understand that spiritual beliefs are personal choices that shouldn't interfere with political effectiveness or social harmony. This pragmatic approach to religion will serve them well in an empire that includes hundreds of different spiritual traditions. As their formal education progresses, you're beginning to see how your children might contribute to the family's interests and the empire's governance. Your son might become an administrator, diplomat, or military officer. Your daughter might strengthen political alliances through strategic marriage, or become influential through household management and social networking. But their success will ultimately depend on their ability to prove themselves useful in a system that rewards competence while demanding loyalty. Imperial education provides opportunities, but it also creates expectations that must be fulfilled regardless of personal preferences or inclinations. Tonight, you watch your children sleeping and contemplate the extraordinary lives they're likely to lead. They'll travel across continents, interact with people from dozens of different cultures, and participate in political decisions that affect millions of lives. Their education is preparing them for influence and responsibility that would have been unimaginable in your former existence. Your role as their mother involves balancing imperial expectations with personal love, preparing them for success while protecting them from the psychological costs of power. You're raising children who will become citizens of the world, but also servants of an empire that demands absolute loyalty. Your children are now 8 and 6 years old enough to begin participating in the complex diplomatic and commercial activities that define imperial household operations. Today marks their formal introduction to the international responsibilities that will shape their adult lives. A diplomatic mission has arrived from the court of Louis XIII of France, seeking to establish formal relations between the Mongol Empire and the Christian kingdoms of Western Europe. This presents an ideal opportunity for your children to observe high-level diplomacy while practicing their language skills and cultural knowledge. The French delegation includes knights, clergy, merchants, and scholars representing different aspects of European civilization. Their appearance, customs, and attitudes provide your children with direct exposure to a culture radically different from anything within the empire's normal experience. This encounter illustrates the truly global scope of Mongol influence and the diplomatic complexities that maintain imperial stability. Your role during these negotiations involves cultural interpretation and protocol management. The Europeans don't understand Mongol customs, social hierarchies, or communication styles. Your knowledge of multiple cultural systems makes you valuable for preventing misunderstandings that could damage diplomatic relationships. The French are particularly confused by the visible presence and apparent influence of women in Mongol political discussions. European customs restrict women to domestic roles with minimal political involvement. Mongol practices encourage female participation in family decisions that affect territorial, administration, and military planning. Your children observe these cultural differences with the analytical detachment that comes from growing up in a multicultural environment. They're learning to recognize that different societies organize relationships, authority, and social obligations according to different principles, none of which is inherently superior to others. The commercial aspects of the diplomatic mission provide lessons in the international trade networks that support imperial prosperity. The Europeans offer luxury goods from their territories, fine textiles, precious metals, religious artifacts and technological innovations unknown in Central Asia. They're seeking access to Asian products, silks, spices, precious stones and manufactured goods available only through Mongol trade connections. Your son demonstrates remarkable aptitude for understanding the economic calculations that govern these negotiations. He's already analyzing profit margins, transportation costs, and market demand with sophistication that impresses both Mongol and European participants. His teachers predict he might excel in commercial administration or diplomatic service. Your daughter shows exceptional skill at reading the personal dynamics that underlie formal negotiations. She can identify which European representatives hold real authority, which are merely ceremonial participants, and which might be susceptible to personal influence through social interaction. These insights prove valuable for developing negotiation strategies. The religious dimensions of the diplomatic mission create fascinating opportunities for cultural education. The Europeans are intensely concerned with theological questions that seem irrelevant to Mongol priorities. They want to discuss religious conversion, missionary activities, and theological differences between Christianity and other spiritual traditions. The Mongol response reflects their pragmatic approach to religious diversity. They're willing to protect Christian communities within the empire and allow missionary activities as long as these don't create political problems or interfere with administrative efficiency. Religious beliefs are personal choices that shouldn't complicate political relationships. Your children participate in formal dinners that demonstrate the sophisticated cultural fusion that characterizes imperial entertaining. Chinese culinary techniques applied to Persian ingredients using Mongol presentation styles, served with European wines and accompanied by musical performances representing multiple traditions. These social events provide practical education in the diplomatic skills your children will need throughout their lives. They're learning to make conversation with people from radically different backgrounds, to show respect for unfamiliar customs, and to gather intelligence through casual social interaction. The negotiations extend over several weeks, providing ongoing opportunities for cultural observation and language practice. Your children improve their Latin vocabulary while learning about European political structures, military technologies, and commercial practices. They're developing the broad cultural knowledge that makes imperial administrators effective. But the diplomatic mission also reveals the limitations and challenges facing the empire. Communication across vast distances remains slow and unreliable. Cultural misunderstandings create constant potential for conflict. Administrative coordination becomes increasingly difficult as the empire expands beyond its traditional organizational methods. Your son expresses interest in traveling to European territories as part of future diplomatic or commercial missions. The idea of seeing Christian kingdoms, Gothic cathedrals, and Mediterranean cities appeals to his intellectual curiosity and adventurous spirit. His multicultural education has prepared him for such cross-cultural exploration. Your daughter shows preference for remaining closer to the empire's traditional territories while developing expertise in managing relationships between different cultural communities within imperial boundaries. Her social intelligence suggests she might excel at resolving conflicts between competing ethnic and religious groups. The commercial negotiations conclude successfully, with agreements that will benefit both sides, while strengthening imperial trade networks. Your children have witnessed the complex calculations and cultural sensitivities required for effective international commerce. They've also learned about the patience and persistence necessary for diplomatic success. As the European delegation prepares to return to France, they present gifts that illustrate their culture's highest achievements. Religious manuscripts illuminated with exquisite artistry, mechanical clocks that demonstrate European technological innovation, musical instruments that produce sounds unknown in Asian traditions. The Mongol reciprocal gifts reflect the empire's international connections and sophisticated tastes. Chinese porcelain, Persian carpets, Indian jewels, and Mongol horses that represent the finest products available from across the known world. These exchanges create personal relationships that transcend formal diplomatic agreements. Your children's participation in these ceremonies marks their formal recognition as junior members of the imperial diplomatic community. They've proven capable of representing family interests while respecting foreign customs and contributing to successful international negotiations. Tonight, as the household reviews the diplomatic mission's outcomes, your children ask sophisticated questions about cultural differences, trade relationships, and the political factors that influence international cooperation. Their multicultural education is producing exactly the kind of analytical thinking that makes imperial administrators effective. You're proud of their development, but also aware that their growing competence brings increased expectations and responsibilities. They're becoming valuable family assets, which enhances their security, but also increases the pressure to prove themselves useful throughout their lives. Their exposure to European culture has broadened their understanding of human possibilities, while reinforcing their appreciation for the opportunities available within the Mongol Empire. They're learning to value their position while remaining curious about alternative ways of organizing society and relationships. Your children are now 12 and 10 years old, approaching the age when their adult roles within the empire will be determined. This transition period reveals both the extraordinary opportunities and the harsh realities that define life as imperial relatives with mixed heritage and uncertain status. Your son's education has progressed to advanced administrative training that would qualify him for territorial appointments in distant regions of the empire. He speaks 5 languages fluently, understands the legal systems governing different cultural communities, and demonstrates the analytical skills necessary for complex problem-solving in multicultural environments. But his mixed heritage creates obstacles alongside opportunities. Pure Mongol bloodlines receive preference for the most prestigious appointments. Children of concubines rank below children of official wives in succession considerations. His competence might earn him important positions, but he'll always be competing against candidates with superior genealogical credentials. Your daughter faces different but equally complex challenges. Her intelligence, beauty, and diplomatic skills make her valuable for strategic marriage alliances that could benefit the family's political interests. But her mother's foreign origins limit the prestige of matches available to her. She might marry into wealthy merchant families or minor nobility, but she'll never become the wife of a major prince. These limitations aren't necessarily disadvantages. Secondary status sometimes provides more freedom and less scrutiny than primary positions. Your children might have more opportunities to pursue personal interests and develop individual competencies than their higher-ranking cousins, who bear greater pressure to fulfill predetermined roles. The empire itself is changing in ways that affect your family's prospects. The easy conquests that built Mongol power are becoming more difficult as remaining targets develop better defenses and alliance systems. Future expansion will require different skills and strategies than the cavalry charges that dominated earlier campaigns. Administrative competence becomes increasingly valuable as military prowess becomes less decisive. Your son's multicultural knowledge and diplomatic skills position him well for the empire's evolving needs. Your daughter's social intelligence and cultural flexibility prepare her for influence in an increasingly complex international system. But political changes also create new dangers. Succession disputes continue to threaten family stability. Economic pressures strain the tribute system that funds imperial operations. Religious movements challenge the tolerance that has maintained internal peace. Your family's security depends on successfully navigating these evolving challenges. Your own position has stabilized over the years but remains fundamentally precarious. Gyuk's affection and your children's success provide protection against arbitrary dismissal. Your economic activities have generated enough wealth to ensure basic security. Your cultural knowledge and administrative skills make you valuable for ongoing household operations. But concubine status never provides absolute security. Political changes could eliminate your protection overnight. Economic disruptions could destroy your financial independence. Personal conflicts could turn allies into enemies. Your survival still depends on maintaining usefulness while avoiding dangerous controversies. The psychological costs of imperial life become more apparent as your children mature. They're developing the analytical detachment and strategic thinking necessary for political success. But these skills sometimes conflict with emotional authenticity and personal relationships. Learning to calculate human interactions creates competence, but also isolation. Your son struggles with questions about loyalty and identity. that have no clear answers. Should he prioritize Mongol imperial interests or advocacy for the populations his mother represents? How can he balance personal ambition with family obligations? What happens when competing loyalties create irreconcilable conflicts? Your daughter faces similar dilemmas about authenticity and performance in social relationships. Her diplomatic skills require presenting different aspects of her personality to different audiences. This adaptability provides advantages, but makes it difficult to maintain consistent personal identity or genuine emotional connections. You're teaching them to embrace complexity rather than seeking simple solutions to complicated problems. Imperial life requires managing contradictions rather than resolving them. Success comes from maintaining functionality within systems that demand compromise and flexibility. Religious education continues to emphasize tolerance and practical accommodation, but your children are beginning to understand the political calculations behind this apparent broad-mindedness. Religious diversity is encouraged because it provides administrative advantages, not because the empire values spiritual pluralism for its own sake. Economic education reveals similar pragmatic motivations behind apparently generous policies. Trade networks create wealth that funds military operations. Cultural tolerance reduces administrative costs and rebellion risks. Even charitable activities serve political purposes by demonstrating imperial benevolence and generating population loyalty. Your children's growing sophistication enables them to participate in more complex household operations. Your son assists with territorial correspondence and commercial negotiations. Your daughter helps manage diplomatic entertaining and family relationship maintenance. Their contributions provide valuable experience while reducing your workload, but increased responsibility also brings increased scrutiny. Their mistakes now carry political consequences that affect family interests. Their successes create expectations for continued high performance. The pressure to prove themselves useful intensifies as they approach adult independence. The international nature of their education creates opportunities for travel and cultural exploration that previous generations could never imagine. Your son might serve in Chinese territories, Persian regions, or European outposts. Your daughter might marry into families with commercial interests spanning continents. These opportunities come with obligations to represent family interests regardless of personal preferences. Their education has prepared them for effectiveness in diverse environments, but it has also created expectations that they'll sacrifice individual desires for collective benefit when conflicts arise. Tonight, you discuss their futures with Gyuyuk in the privacy of his chambers. Your son's administrative appointments might take him thousands of miles from home for years at a time. Your daughter's marriage negotiations will determine her adult lifestyle and social position. These decisions will shape their entire lives while serving family political strategies. Physical intimacy with Gyuyuk continues to provide emotional connection and political influence, but the relationship has evolved from passionate romance to comfortable partnership. Sexual activities remain pleasurable, but feel more routine after years of familiarity. Emotional intimacy has deepened even as physical excitement has decreased. Your position as mother of successful imperial children provides security and influence that transcend sexual relationships. Gyuyuk values your insights about child development, educational strategies, and family dynamics. Your maternal role creates permanent bonds that enhance your long-term prospects within the household. As you contemplate your children's approaching adulthood, you understand that your greatest success and your greatest vulnerability are the same thing: their competence and potential. Their achievements reflect well on your maternal effectiveness, but their futures depend on forces beyond your control or protection. Your children are now 15 and 13 years old, fully mature by Mongol standards, and ready to assume adult responsibilities within the empire. This transition marks the culmination of your success as a concubine and mother, but it also initiates a new phase of life that brings both liberation and loss. Your son has received his first administrative appointment, assistant to the governor of a province in Central Asia that includes territories from your original homeland. The appointment reflects confidence in his competence and provides opportunities for advancement, but it also means separation from family support systems that have shaped his entire life. The irony isn't lost on you. Your child will now help govern the region where you were born, captured, and enslaved. His authority will extend over populations that include your former neighbours and cultural relatives. His decisions might affect the welfare of people who knew you before your transformation into imperial property. Your daughter's marriage negotiations have concluded successfully with an engagement to the son of a wealthy Silk Road merchant family. The alliance provides political and economic advantages for both families, while offering her opportunities for influence and independence within her new household. But it also means permanent separation from the family that has defined her identity. These developments represent success by imperial standards. Your children have proven themselves valuable enough to merit important responsibilities and advantageous marriages. Their futures appear secure within the systems that provide stability and opportunity for competent individuals. Your maternal duties have been fulfilled successfully, but success brings emotional costs that you didn't anticipate during the early years of struggle and adaptation. Your son's departure eliminates daily interaction with someone who represents your greatest achievement and most important emotional relationship. Your daughter's marriage will create similar separation from your closest female companion. The household dynamics shift as your children's adult independence reduces your primary responsibilities. You're no longer needed for daily child-rearing duties that have occupied much of your time and energy for over a decade. Your role transitions from active parenting to occasional advisory consultation. Gyuk's relationship with you evolves accordingly. Sexual intimacy continues, but with less frequency and intensity, as physical attraction decreases with age and familiarity. Emotional connection remains strong, but it's no longer reinforced by shared child-rearing responsibilities. Your value to him increasingly depends on administrative competence rather than maternal or sexual services. This transition creates opportunities for pursuing interests and activities that were impossible during the intensive parenting years. Your language skills and cultural knowledge remain valuable for household operations. Your economic activities continue to generate income and investment opportunities. Your social connections provide access to information and influence networks. You're also free to develop relationships and pursuits that reflect personal preferences rather than family obligations. Some concubines in similar situations focus on religious activities, business development, or intellectual interests. Others become mentors for younger women entering imperial households. A few even negotiate for independence and establish autonomous lives. But freedom also brings insecurity. Your position remains dependent on continued usefulness to Gyuyuk and the household. Age reduces your sexual attractiveness while increasing health concerns that could affect your productivity. The skills that made you valuable might become obsolete as the empire continues evolving. Your economic activities provide some protection against these vulnerabilities. 15 years of careful investment and business development have generated enough wealth to support basic independence if circumstances require it. Your commercial relationships could sustain modest prosperity even without household support. Cultural changes within the empire create both opportunities and challenges for your future security. Increasing emphasis on administrative competence over military prowess favors your educational background and multicultural skills. But growing influence of settled populations might reduce advantages associated with nomadic adaptability and cultural flexibility. Religious developments also affect your prospects. Buddhism is gaining influence within imperial circles, particularly among educated populations interested in philosophical sophistication. Your religious flexibility positions you well for this trend, but it also requires continued learning and adaptation to maintain relevance. Your son writes regularly from his administrative posting, describing challenges and successes that demonstrate his growing competence and confidence. His letters reveal that his multicultural education has proven valuable for governing diverse populations with complex cultural needs. His mother's heritage helps him understand local concerns that pure Mongol administrators might overlook. Your daughter's letters from her new household describe adjustment difficulties and gradual integration into merchant family operations. Her diplomatic skills are being used to manage commercial relationships with trading partners from across the empire. Her education in multiple cultural traditions makes her valuable for international business negotiations. These communications provide satisfaction about your children's success, while emphasizing your increasing distance from their daily lives. They're building independent identities and relationships that don't require maternal support or guidance. Your influence over their futures decreases as their personal competence and social connections increase. Turrigen has become a closer companion as shared experiences of motherhood and household management create bonds that transcend formal hierarchies. You collaborate on training younger concubines, managing complex domestic operations, and providing advice about navigating imperial family dynamics. These activities utilize your accumulated knowledge while creating meaningful social relationships. Physical changes associated with aging require adjustments to personal routines and expectations. Traditional Chinese medicine and Persian health practices help maintain functionality, but energy levels and physical capabilities inevitably decline. Sexual relationships with Guyuk continue, but with accommodations for changing bodies and reduced frequency. The empire itself shows signs of strain that could affect your family's long-term security. Administrative costs increase as conquered territories require ongoing management rather than simple tribute extraction. Military expenses remain high despite reduced opportunities for profitable conquest. Economic pressures create political tensions that threaten the stability your security depends upon. But the empire's problems also create opportunities for people with your skills and experience. Administrative competence becomes more valuable as governing challenges increase. Cultural knowledge provides advantages as the empire seeks to manage diverse populations more effectively. Economic expertise helps identify solutions to fiscal pressures affecting imperial operations. Tonight, you sit in your private chambers, reading letters from your children, while contemplating the extraordinary journey that has brought you to this point. 20 years ago, you were a village nobody facing subsistence survival and early death. Now you're an educated, economically independent participant in history's largest political organization. Your children are citizens of the world, with opportunities and experiences that span continents. They speak multiple languages, understand different cultural systems, and participate in political and economic activities that affect millions of lives. Their success validates the sacrifices and adaptations that made their achievements possible, but success creates its own forms of loss. Your cultural identity has been transformed beyond recognition. Your original family relationships have been severed permanently. Your emotional connections have been shaped by political calculations and strategic necessities rather than spontaneous affection and authentic choice. The trade-offs were necessary for survival and ultimately beneficial for creating opportunities that couldn't have existed otherwise. But acknowledging practical advantages doesn't eliminate psychological costs associated with cultural displacement and relationship commodification. As you prepare for sleep in silk sheets surrounded by luxury that represents the pinnacle of 13th century civilization, you understand that your life embodies both the opportunities and the contradictions that define the Mongol Empire itself. You are now in your 40s, an age that marks you as a survivor in an era when most people die much younger. 25 years have passed since your capture and transformation from village nobody to imperial concubine. The empire that provided the framework for your extraordinary life is showing signs of strain that will reshape everyone's future. The great Khan Menke is dead, and succession disputes are fracturing the unity that enabled Mongol conquests across 3 continents. Different branches of the imperial family are asserting competing claims to ultimate authority, creating civil wars that drain resources and destabilize the administrative systems that maintained imperial control. Your son, now a provincial administrator with 15 years of experience governing diverse populations, writes about increasing difficulties maintaining order in territories where imperial authority is being challenged by local resistance movements. The tribute systems that funded imperial operations are breaking down as regional governors prioritize their own security over central government obligations. Your daughter, established as a prominent merchant family matriarch, reports that trade networks are becoming unreliable due to political instability and bandit activities. The security that enabled commercial prosperity across vast distances is deteriorating as military resources are diverted to succession conflicts rather than frontier protection. These developments affect your personal security and future prospects. Guyuk's political position depends on imperial stability but appears increasingly fragile. Your household's wealth and status could disappear overnight if succession struggles eliminate the political relationships that provide your protection and privilege. But the empire's problems also create opportunities for people with your experience and adaptability. Administrative expertise becomes more valuable as governing challenges intensify. Cultural knowledge provides advantages as regional authorities seek to maintain control over diverse populations without central support. Economic skills help identify survival strategies during periods of political uncertainty. Your accumulated wealth and business relationships provide some protection against political upheavals. 25 years of careful investment and commercial development have created income sources that don't depend entirely on imperial household support. Your economic independence offers security that purely political relationships couldn't guarantee. Cultural changes within the empire reflect broader patterns of fragmentation and localization. The cosmopolitan tolerance that characterized imperial civilization at its peak is giving way to more narrow ethnic and religious loyalties as different regions assert autonomous identities. The international fusion that defined imperial culture is being replaced by reversion to traditional local customs. These trends affect your position in complex ways. Your multicultural identity, which provided advantages during the empire's expansive phase, becomes potentially problematic as populations emphasize exclusive ethnic loyalties. Your foreign origins, once valued for their contribution to imperial diversity, might now be viewed with suspicion or hostility. Your relationship with Guyuk has evolved into comfortable companionship that provides emotional support during increasingly stressful times. Sexual intimacy continues occasionally, but with reduced frequency as physical attraction decreases and political pressures increase. Your value to him now depends primarily on practical competence and emotional loyalty rather than sexual services. The household's operations require constant adjustment as economic conditions deteriorate and political relationships become unreliable. Traditional income sources are being disrupted by imperial instability. Investment strategies must account for increased risks and reduced returns. Social relationships need revision as power balances shift and loyalties change. Your administrative responsibilities now focus on crisis management rather than expansion and development. Managing correspondence with territorial governors who might be declaring independence, negotiating with merchants whose trading routes have become dangerous, coordinating with family members whose political allegiances are becoming questionable. Religious activities provide psychological comfort during uncertain times. The Buddhist meditation practices you've learned help maintain emotional stability despite external chaos. Tengrist ceremonies connect you with traditional Mongol values that provide continuity despite political upheavals. Islamic prayers offer community with populations whose support might become necessary for survival. Younger concubines in the household look to you for guidance about navigating imperial decline and its implications for their futures. Your experience surviving political changes and economic disruptions makes you valuable as a mentor and advisor. Teaching survival strategies provides purpose while creating social relationships that might prove important for mutual support. Some of your contemporaries are making preparations for imperial collapse that seem increasingly realistic. Former concubines who accumulated sufficient wealth are purchasing property in stable regions where they might establish independent lives. Others are developing relationships with religious communities that could provide security if political systems fail entirely. Your own contingency planning includes strengthening commercial relationships that could support basic survival if household support disappears, maintaining connections with your children who have established positions in different regions, developing relationships with local communities that might provide protection if imperial authority collapses completely. But you're also committed to supporting Guyuk and the household through whatever challenges emerge. 25 years of shared experiences have created loyalties that transcend practical calculations. Your emotional investment in this community makes abandonment difficult, even when strategic considerations suggest preparation for independence. The international connections that defined imperial civilization are deteriorating as communication systems break down and travel becomes dangerous. Letters from distant territories arrive irregularly or not at all. Trade goods that once flowed freely across continents become scarce and expensive. Cultural exchange that enriched imperial life is being replaced by isolation and suspicion. Your children's letters describe increasing regional autonomy as central authority weakens. Your son reports that his administrative responsibilities now require negotiating with local leaders as equals, rather than commanding obedience as imperial representatives. Your daughter writes about merchant families establishing private security forces to protect commercial operations that imperial military can no longer guarantee. These developments suggest that the future might belong to smaller-scale political organizations that emphasize local loyalties over imperial integration. The Mongol Empire's remarkable achievement of unifying diverse populations under single authority appears to be giving way to fragmentation along ethnic, religious, and regional lines. Tonight, you contemplate the historical moments you're witnessing from your unique perspective as someone who experienced the empire's peak and its decline. The political organization that transformed your life and created opportunities for your children is dissolving into the kind of localized conflicts that preceded Mongol unification. Your survival through this transition will require the same adaptability that enabled your original transformation from village captive to imperial concubine. The skills that proved valuable during the empire's expansion, cultural flexibility, linguistic competence, administrative knowledge, might remain useful during its fragmentation, but the psychological adjustments required for surviving imperial collapse might be more difficult than adapting to imperial conquest. The security, prosperity, and opportunities that defined your adult life are disappearing along with the political system that created them. As you prepare for sleep in chambers that still reflect imperial luxury despite growing political uncertainty, you understand that your extraordinary life might be ending just as dramatically as it began. The empire that provided the framework for your transformation is failing, but the skills and relationships that survival required might still provide foundation for whatever comes next. It is now winter, 1260. You are 53 years old, ancient by the standards of your birth era, yet still vital enough to observe the final dissolution of the unified Mongol Empire. Kublai Khan rules in China, while his brother Arik Boka contests his authority from Mongolia. The empire has fractured into competing khanates that will never again coordinate their actions under single leadership. The household that defined your adult life has adapted to these realities with characteristic Mongol pragmatism. Gyuk has aligned himself with regional authorities who can provide immediate protection rather than distant imperial claims that lack enforcement mechanisms. Your survival has required similar practical adjustments to changing circumstances. Your economic activities now focus on local and regional markets rather than transcontinental trade networks that have become unreliable. The business relationships you've developed over decades provide income and security that don't depend on imperial political stability. Your commercial competence has proven more durable than imperial authority. Your relationship with Gyuk has evolved into elderly companionship that provides mutual support during the final phase of life. Sexual intimacy has ended, but emotional connection remains strong after 3 decades of shared experiences. Your value to him now depends on practical assistance and loyal friendship rather than sexual services or administrative competence. The younger women in the household treat you with respect that acknowledges your survival and adaptation through historical changes that destroyed many people who seemed more secure. Your experience navigating political upheavals and economic disruptions makes you valuable as a source of practical wisdom about surviving uncertainty. Your children have established successful independent lives that don't require ongoing parental support or guidance. Your son has become a respected administrator in the fragmented political landscape that replaced imperial unity. Your daughter has built a prosperous merchant dynasty that spans multiple regions. Their achievements validate the sacrifices and adaptations that made their success possible. Correspondence with your children provides satisfaction about their accomplishments, while emphasizing your distance from their daily lives. They visit occasionally, but their primary loyalties are to their own families and communities, rather than the imperial household that shaped their childhood. This transition is natural and appropriate, but it still creates emotional distance that sometimes feels lonely. The cultural knowledge that made you valuable during the empire's peak remains useful in the fragmented political landscape that replaced imperial unity. Regional authorities still need administrators who understand diverse populations and can communicate across cultural boundaries. Your multicultural competence provides ongoing opportunities for meaningful work. Religious activities provide increasing comfort as physical capabilities decline and social relationships change. The Buddhist meditation practices that helped you survive earlier crises now offer psychological tools for accepting aging and mortality. Tengrist ceremonies connect you with traditional values that transcend political upheavals and cultural changes. Your accumulated wealth provides security that enables independence if circumstances require it, but also supports charitable activities that create meaning beyond personal survival, helping younger women adapt to concubine life, supporting educational activities that preserve cultural knowledge, contributing to religious communities that provide social services for vulnerable populations. The physical changes associated with aging require constant adjustments to daily routines and expectations. Chinese medical practices and Persian health techniques help maintain functionality, but energy levels continue declining while health concerns increase. Accepting physical limitations becomes a necessary psychological adaptation. Contemporary events provide perspective about the historical significance of the empire you experienced during its peak. The Mongol achievement of unifying diverse populations under transcontinental authority represents a remarkable human accomplishment that might not be repeated for centuries. Your life coincided with one of history's most extraordinary political experiments. But the empire's fragmentation also demonstrates the difficulties of maintaining unity across vast distances and diverse populations. The practical challenges of governing continents ultimately proved insurmountable despite Mongol military superiority and administrative innovation. Your survival through both imperial expansion and decline provides unique insights about the possibilities and limitations of human political organization. Your transformation from village captive to imperial concubine to independent survivor illustrates both the opportunities and costs associated with cultural adaptation and personal reinvention. The skills you developed through forced circumstances created possibilities that wouldn't have existed within your original cultural context, but they also required abandoning elements of identity and relationship that provided meaning and connection. The trade-offs were necessary for survival and ultimately beneficial for creating security and opportunity that improved your quality of life. But acknowledging practical advantages doesn't eliminate awareness of what was lost through cultural displacement and relationship commodification. The contradictions remain complex even after decades of adaptation. Your children's success demonstrates that multicultural competence and adaptability can provide advantages across different political systems and cultural contexts. Their ability to navigate complexity, communicate across cultural boundaries, and maintain effectiveness during periods of change reflects educational investments that transcended specific imperial circumstances. But their achievements also required accepting the psychological costs associated with strategic calculation and cultural performance. Their success reflects competence in managing contradictions rather than resolving them. Their lives embody the same complexities that defined your own experience, transmitted across generations. Tonight, as winter wind howls across the steppes beyond your chambers, you contemplate the extraordinary journey that brought you from village obscurity to imperial prominence to elderly independence. The political system that provided framework for your transformation has disappeared, but the knowledge and relationships that survival required continue providing foundation for whatever time remains. Your story represents one life among millions affected by the Mongol Empire's expansion and decline. But your unique perspective, as captive and participant, victim and beneficiary, foreign outsider and imperial insider, provides insights about human adaptability and the complex relationships between individual survival and historical change. The silk sheets that once symbolized impossible luxury now provide comfortable warmth for aging bones that have endured more changes than most people experience in multiple lifetimes. The rooms that once represented imperial power now offer simple security for reflection about lessons learned through surviving historical upheaval. As sleep approaches, carrying dreams that blend memories of childhood villages with images of imperial courts, you understand that your life has embodied both the possibilities and contradictions that define human responses to historical forces beyond individual control. The empire is finished, but the knowledge, relationships, and psychological skills that survival required remain available for whatever challenges and opportunities might emerge during whatever years remain. Your transformation continues, guided by the same adaptability that enabled your original survival and success. Tomorrow will bring another day of managing aging bodies and changing circumstances while maintaining the practical competence and emotional resilience that have sustained you through 3 decades of imperial service and political upheaval. Your story continues, shaped by the same complexities that have defined every chapter of your extraordinary life. In the quiet darkness of imperial chambers that no longer represent imperial authority, you rest secure in the knowledge that you have survived history's most ambitious political experiment, while maintaining enough humanity to appreciate both its achievements and its costs. Your legacy lives in children who carry your adaptability into an uncertain future, in younger women who learnt survival from your example, and in your own continuing capacity to find meaning and security amid the eternal complexity of human existence. The Mongol Empire is gone, but the skills it taught you remain. Your story ends as it began, with survival, adaptation, and the endless human capacity to create meaning from circumstances that seemed impossible to endure. Sleep well, knowing that you have lived through times that will be remembered as long as humans tell stories about power, survival, and the strange alchemy that transforms captivity into opportunity, loss into wisdom, and endings into new beginnings.